Hey everyone, what's going on? So the big news story today was the bridge collapse in Baltimore. It was the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And what's so interesting is that earlier, before I went to work this morning, I finally uploaded this video that I made on March 22nd, so that was on Friday. And this video was all about a dream that I had, and that dream is connected to how I've won $10,000 two times this year gambling on slot machines. And I also pointed out how that dream had all kinds of stuff to do with this old theme with bridge collapses. There was a dream and a bridge collapse theme that is connected to a money theme. And in this video, I just want to point it out really quick. I'm talking about this bridge theme that goes back to 2018 was Super Bowl 52 and how the Super Bowl was in Minneapolis. And Minneapolis is famous for a bridge collapse that happened on August 1st, 8/1 of 2007. And it supposedly fell 81 feet, and the main trusses were 81 meters long. And it also said that it took them 81 minutes to transport everybody to the hospital. And, you know, there's all kinds of other things with this. Pope Francis that year turned 81 years old, 81 days after the Jesuit anniversary. He's the first supposed Jesuit pope. And the word pontiff, like think about pope and pontiff, the word pontiff means bridge builder. In the language of Gematria and Hebrew lettering, if you write out the word pope, it equals 81. And there was just all kinds of stories connected to bridge stuff. I knew there was a narrative with this Super Bowl synced up to a bridge collapse. And then on the Ides of March that year, we got a bridge collapse in Miami at the FIU campus, right? It was on the Ides of March right after the Super Bowl that year. But what's so interesting about this bridge that collapsed today being the Francis Scott Key Bridge is that Super Bowl, Super Bowl 52, was also linked up to Francis Scott Key because it had everything to do with kneeling during the national anthem and the NFL players, right? Donald Trump that year had called out the people for kneeling on the date 23/9, and the flag was sewn at 239 Arch Street in Philadelphia. Then Philadelphia goes on to be in the Super Bowl that year. Donald Trump also born on Flag Day. There was all kinds of stuff that had to do with the national anthem and standing during the national anthem. And what I pointed out back then was that Francis Scott Key was also connected to that number 81 and the Minneapolis bridge collapse that happened on 8/1 because Francis Scott Key was born on August 1st, 8/1. And it gets even deeper, because that Super Bowl was played at U.S. Bank Stadium, right? That's why it was connected to money. And it was also during the 88th anniversary of the stock market crash. And in the language of Gematria, if you write out like the word kneel, kneel equals 88, the Star Spangled Banner equals 88, Colin Kaepernick equaled 88, right? Colin Kaepernick. His name equaled 88. Trump equaled 88. Let's talk about Herbert Hoover being the stock market crash president. Think how HH, right? Herbert Hoover, Hubert Humphrey, Minneapolis. HH is the eighth letter, a lot like 88. So think about it. It's the 88th anniversary of the stock market crash. The Super Bowl is being played at U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis that's famous for this bridge collapse. And, it gets even more deep when you think about all this because Herbert Hoover was the president during the stock market crash, but he was also the president that signed the Star Spangled Banner into Congress as the official national anthem, right? So he's the stock market crash president, also signs the Star Spangled Banner as the official national anthem, and he just so happened to die on October 20th, 1964, which just so happens to be current Vice President Kamala Harris's her exact birthday. And Iowa plays a big part in all of this because the governor, Kim Reynolds, who is born on 8/4, right? And there's a whole bunch of stuff with this. Today's Nancy Pelosi's 84th birthday and a bunch of things. But the Iowa governor currently, Kim Reynolds, she became the Iowa governor the same day that Donald Trump met Pope Francis in 2017. And then Joe Biden would later meet Pope Francis on the anniversary of the stock market crash in the year 2022. And that same day, we got a story with Kim Reynolds in the news. And I'm going to skip over it. I've talked about it. Maybe I'll leave a link in the description. But it was all connected to the number 456 with Squid Game that had just released in 2022. And that had everything to do with money, the giant piggy bank and money and, all of these things that are related to that. Donald Trump and Joe Biden met the popes as presidents 4 years, 5 months, and 6 days apart, like a 456. But the whole point of bringing all of this up is the fact that I made this video on Friday. I'm talking about a dream and how it's connected to a bridge collapse theme that goes back to 2018, right? And you can come watch this video. If you go to like 12 minutes, that's when I talk about all the 81 stuff with the Minneapolis Bridge. And once again, all of that was related back to Francis Scott Key as well. And now we get the bridge collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And even more odd in relation to dreams, and this dream connected to the bridge collapse symbolism, is that when I looked up this what happened with this Francis Scott Key Bridge, this boat called the MV Dali had crashed into it, right? And if you look it up, it's actually, this boat is named after this guy named Salvador Dali. And this guy, I started just looking into him, I didn't know who he was. Apparently he's a famous artist, right? A Spanish artist. Let's see if I can get out of here though. I don't know where my post went. But he's a famous Spanish artist. And I was at work today. Another thing too at work, so like I uploaded this video, I went to work, and right when I got to work, the girl that I work with yesterday, who didn't have to work today, she Snapchatted me this thing about the bridge collapse. And the reason she did was because yesterday I was telling her all about how I've won $10,000 twice this year, and it's linked up to this bridge theme that's connected to, or this dream theme that is connected to bridge collapses. And I was telling her I think there's going to be a big bridge collapse this year. So that's why she sent me that Snapchat, because she was like, what the hell? Today there's a bridge collapse the very next day. And so then I looked up the bridge collapse, and I was, so I started writing a blog post while I was at work a bit. But anyway, so the guy that this boat is named after is Salvador Dali. And I looked him up, and I just randomly clicked on one of his works, and it was the Christ of St. John of the Cross, right? And the reason I did that was because this dream theme is also connected to the angel Gabriel. And oddly enough, today, March 26th, is a feast day of Gabriel. It's the synaxis of the Archangel Gabriel. So it's even more interesting that this bridge collapse would happen on one of the feast days of the Archangel Gabriel, something I've talked about for a number of years in the stuff with Gabriel. But the angel Gabriel only talks to Mary, Daniel, and Zechariah in the Bible. And he tells Mary she's going to birth Jesus, and he tells Zechariah that he's going to be the father of John the Baptist, right? So the Christ of St. John. I just randomly clicked on that one just because I was thinking of that stuff. And of course, this painting, it talks about how, according to Dali, he was convinced by a dream that these features would mar his depiction of Christ. So, this drawing or this painting, it was inspired by a cosmic dream that this guy had. And then I started looking into other stuff, and I looked at a different thing, and he has one called soft construction with boiled beans, premonition of civil war. And apparently he claims that he was aware of the Spanish Civil War 6 months before it happened. And he said that this painting was proof or evidence of the prophetic power of his subconscious mind. Exactly the things that I've been talking about for a number of years, And apparently he's a surrealist. He's into surrealism, and that is all about, dreams and whatnot. And the guy who coined the term surrealism, he even defines it as pure psychic automatism, or however you say it, just it's basically like letting your unconscious mind just do things, automatic writing, but automatic drawing and painting in this case. But later in the day, uh I was listening to, I don't know what I was doing. I don't know if it was, I know it was one of Zach's videos that he had, and somebody called in and said that this guy also has a painting called The Broken Bridge and the Dream, right? It's like, what are the odds of that? The Broken Bridge and the Dream? And I mean, just think about all this. So like, what really are the odds that I'm talking about this dream theme and how it's connected to a bridge collapse, and it was connected to all that stuff with the Super Bowl 52, which was also related to Francis Scott Key. And then now today we get the Francis Scott Key Bridge getting run into by a ship that was named after this guy who's talking all about dreams and bridges. What are the odds of this? I mean, it's not like it's the first time this happens to me all of the time. Talk about these things nonstop. I blog about them all the time. Sometimes I wonder if somehow the media uses my blog to write news stories. It's insane how many times I've had synchronicities and whatever, and they're connected to the news stories, and then I blog about it, and I'll blog about, these narratives that I'm talking about, how I think they're all related, and then we get a news story that connects it all together. And I mean, the name of this painting was called The Broken Bridge and the Dream, that if you write it out, it equals 128. And this painting's actually in the St. Petersburg, the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, which just makes me think of Russia, St. Petersburg. There's a big thing with this going on, but if you go back to this 2018 stuff and the bridge symbolism, where I'm talking about the stock market crash or whatever else, remember Vladimir Putin opened the Crimea Bridge. Think about Russia and Ukraine. Donald Trump also met Kim Jong-un, and they talked about how they were building bridges. And when Donald Trump wanted to build the wall, Pope Francis said that real Christians don't build walls, they build bridges. Remember, Pontiff means bridge builder. We had this FIU bridge collapse. All the stuff with the Super Bowl linked up. I even talked about how that Super Bowl was related to the death of my Uncle Clancy right here. And it really was. It was connected to my grandma dying. It was connected to my Uncle Clancy dying. And this day that I went to my grandma's house, where my sister was there, and I found out she owned a company called Eagle Acres, a whole year before the Eagles even made the Super Bowl, and that was on Eagle Street even. But my Uncle Clancy was born on the 81st day of the year, and the reason he was important to that Eagle narrative was because his son Ryan is the only Eagles fan that I ever knew at that point of my life. So I knew there was something important to Eagles. Then my uncle ends up dying 81 days before my cousin, who's a big Eagles fan's birthday. So he's born on the 81st day, dies 81 days before his son's birthday, who's the Eagles fan. The Eagles Super Bowl was all synced up to the bridge collapse connected to the number 81. Back on June 11th of 2023, we got a overpass bridge that collapsed in Philadelphia, and that just so happened to be 81 days before August 31st, the big date I was talking about in my previous video. But my coworker's father actually drove over that bridge just before it collapsed, and his birthday was August 31st, which was 81 days afterward. But my sister was also important to that experience. She was at my grandma's that same day. My uncle was there, and I, once again, it's a lot to explain. It's going to take way too long. But my sister, her town just so happened to be featured in a Super Bowl commercial of Super Bowl 52, Audubon, Iowa. And then just a month after that Super Bowl, a girl from her town ended up drowning in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And the last person who drowned in that spot was named Lyle Eagletail, right? And that town is named after like John James Audubon, who was famous for writing a book called The Birds of America. The bird of America is the eagle, right? There was all kinds of stuff with this. But my sister's name just so happens to sum to 128 in the language of Gematria here. Michelle Hansen. Her name equals 128. And if you write out bridge collapse, right? Bridge collapse, it equals 128. And in my previous video, I talked about Toby Keith, and Toby Keith being important to the FIU bridge collapse and the dream that I had, and how it was connected to this theme with 9 days. And in 2022, I had synchronicity with my sister on January 19th, and I was, 9 days later, we had the bridge collapse on January 28th that was in Pittsburgh or whatever, and that bridge that collapsed, whatever it was, it summed to 128. I can't think of the name right now. And that was the same day Joe Biden was supposed to be there to talk about his infrastructure bill, and then a bridge collapses in that town on January 28th, just like how bridge collapse equals 128. Like how in my previous video I talked all about Sean Penn equaling 128 and how he was connected to this 9 days before in Dream Theme with the bridge collapses. And Sean Penn's 128. My sister's name equals 128. Eagles in Jewish Gematria, I believe, even equals 128. And oddly enough, if you go from today, 3/26, to Francis Scott Key's birthday, and also the date of that Minneapolis bridge collapse, it's 128 days, right? So a bridge collapse 128 days before Francis Scott Key's birthday. Bridge collapse equals 128. They even now say that that the bridge collapse happened at 1:28 in the morning. Look at that, 1:28 in the morning even. So at 1:28 in the morning, 128 days before Francis Scott Key's birthday, the bridge collapses. If you write out bridge collapse, it equals 128. Even more interesting in relation to Joe Biden, if you go from Joe Biden's birthday, today is also a span of 128 days after Joe Biden's birthday, right? And his 81st birthday, too. Joe Biden's 81st birthday. Think about that in relation to the bridge collapse theme. And something I didn't point out back in 2018, the Golden Gate Bridge also turned 81 years old in 2018. The same year that Pope Francis was 81 years old. They're both named... San Francisco was named after St. Francis of Assisi, just like Pope Francis. But if you write out Golden Gate Bridge, notice it equals 81 frontwards and backwards, right? Just like how the word Gabriel equals 135 too, just like Golden Gate Bridge. So there is definitely a narrative here with this. Golden Gate Bridge equals the same as Gabriel. This big number 81. So Joe Biden, it's 128 days after Joe Biden's 81st birthday. And today is also 81 days before Donald Trump's birthday, which is Flag Day. A span of 81 days. And once again, in relation to the money theme and how it's connected to Kamala Harris and being born on the same day that Herbert Hoover died, the stock market president and so on. If you go from today to Kamala Harris's birthday, it's 6 months and 24 days. And that stands out because back in 2018, the big thing I was talking about was the date June 24th, like 6/24. Because my Uncle Clancy had died like 6 months and 24 days before my birthday, and his mom, my grandma, had died 6 months and 24 days before his birthday, or before he died. So they died 6 months and 24 days apart, and then he died 6 months and 24 days before my birthday. And there was all kinds of stuff with the date 624 that year that I was following. But that date also in 2018 just so happened to be Pope Francis's 1929th day as being the Pope. And that stuck out to me because Vatican City was established in the year 1929, and it was also the same year as the stock market crash. And whoever was the Pope, I don't know what Pope it was, you can look it up. Look up the Pope during the 1929. That Pope died at the age of 81. So, once again, just connected to this same narrative. But today's 6 months and 24 days before Kamala Harris's birthday. This number 624 linked up to the stock market stuff that I was talking about. The number 624 is also important to John the Baptist, because that is the feast day of John the Baptist, right? Just want to point it out here. It is the Nativity of John the Baptist, June 24th. It's also the day that modern Freemasonry was founded. There's a lot of interesting things with this date, June 24th. And recall in, I can't remember what year it was now, we had that Surfside building collapse, remember, in Miami, right? That was connected to the FIU bridge collapse. Well, that one happened on June 24th. And the reason I know that it was connected to the FIU bridge collapse, because the FIU bridge collapse was a pedestrian bridge. And I don't know if I took a picture of it in here, but the day before the FIU bridge collapse, there was a pedestrian bridge that collapsed in Washington, D.C., right? Right next to, really close to this Francis Scott Key Bridge, right? Washington, D.C., and close to Baltimore and so on. So there was that Miami Surfside bridge or building collapse that was linked up to the FIU bridge collapse that was in Miami on the date, and it was on the date 624, the Surfside one was. And you know what else is interesting with the whole angel Gabriel thing? So for years I talked about how I started talking about the angel Gabriel in 2017 after my uncle died in a weird car crash, and there was all the umbrella symbolism that I can't talk about because I might get my video deleted. But I'm going to talk about it a tiny bit here. But that year was the same year that my girlfriend got pregnant, and she had a miscarriage with twins, and then there was a big twin theme, and I was talking all about the angel Gabriel and how it was related to that umbrella symbolism, and I talked about how Gabriel only comes and talks to Daniel, Zechariah, and Mary in the Bible, and my name is Daniel, and I had just had a bunch of synchronicity reading the book of Daniel, where the angel Gabriel actually comes to him in the number 1012. I'm going to skip over that, but it had to do with my uncle dying in the Super Bowl and all that. But think about Zach Hubbard being named Zachary, right? And then later, the Umbrella Man made that video connected to me in the number 166. And then the next day, the lady named Mary called in to the Gematria effect and was talking about how that guy, Umbrella Man, was trying to kill her pet pig. And I was sitting next to two stuffed animal pigs that my daughter called her pets, and I was supposed to watch them before she went to bed, right? And that lady's name equaled 166. A whole bunch of stuff that I'm talking about with this umbrella symbolism and how it was related to the angel Gabriel. But how funny is it that on the Ides of March this year, Zach made a video talking about how his girlfriend, or his wife, I guess it is, who they got married in 2018, I think he even said in this video. I have to go back and listen to it, but it was the Ides of March, a day that I was watching for with all the umbrella symbolism, because Zach kicked Rambo off that episode of the Gematria effect on the Ides of March, and it was synced up to all this cliff. I have a whole video on it on BitChute. I'll leave a link in the description, hopefully. Or maybe it's still on YouTube, but the whole point is Zach said that his wife is pregnant, right? On the Ides of March, the same day as the FIU bridge collapse anniversary, right? So there's something related to this, Think about his name, Zachary. It goes to the same theme that I'm talking about with the angel Gabriel. And, even more interesting in relation to the angel Gabriel and angels and so on is just the other day we had the Baltimore Orioles owner die on March 23rd. And oddly enough, that's the same day that this bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, had opened, March 23rd. So this guy ends up dying on the anniversary of the Francis Scott Key Bridge opening. And look at his name, Peter Angelos, right? Angelos. And he was born in 1929, the year of the stock market crash. And if you go from today to the anniversary of the stock market crash, which is also important to why I think the Iowa women are, have been having a couple good seasons and so on with Caitlin Clark, and why she's such a big deal, because it goes back to the stock market symbolism. Kinnick Stadium in Iowa was even built in 1929. Iowa's the 29th state. It has Interstate 29 that goes all the way through it from north to south. The 10th prime number is 29. The stock market crash on the 29th day of the 10th month in the year 29. But notice today is 217 days before the anniversary of the stock market crash. And if you read out Francis Scott Key, his name just so happens to equal 217. And there's something, for years I've talked about this possible thing with Francis Scott Key, and how it sounds like France has got the key, or Francis has got the key, and it makes me think of Pope Francis, and I talked about the key of David in relation to the Church of Philadelphia. But if it is connected to France, right, I've been talking a lot about France, and France in the Jewish Gematria, if you write it out, it's not on here, but it equals 135, right? Just like how Golden Gate Bridge equals 135, just like how Gabriel equals 135, just like how Putin opened up the Crimea Bridge on the 135th day of 2018. If you read out 81 as words, it even equals 135. Think about that in relation to the Golden Gate Bridge. Surrealism also equals 135 frontwards and backwards. The form of art that the guy that the boat's named after does, right? Surrealism. But in the Francis Bacon ciphers, which are now the capital letter ciphers, and I understand why, but there's a lot of connections to the Francis Bacon with them regardless. And the Francis Bacon ciphers, if you write out France, it equals 229. I'm just not going to pull it up, it's just too much work, but it equals 229. And that just stands out because if you go from Francis Scott Key's birthday to the anniversary of the stock market crash, it's a span of 2 months and 29 days. And also if you go from today, or the day of this bridge collapse, to the date 6/24, it's also 2 months and 29 days without the end date. So this 229, remember, France equals 229. The French Republic was founded on 22/9, which is 2 months and 29 days before the French President Emmanuel Macron's birthday. And remember, Pope Francis arrived in America on that date too, 22/9. And then it was linked up to the ISIS attack in France that year in 2015. And it was linked up to the Francis Bacon ciphers like no other too. But I wasn't even going to make a video on this, but I just felt motivated from my video from before. But there's a million things I can talk about. I'm going to skip over, but, like today being Nancy Pelosi's 84th birthday, and Kim Reynolds being born on 8/4, and the guy who that boat named after, he died at the age of 84. All kinds of stuff with it, but yeah, we'll just leave the video there. I think I touched the points that I wanted to make that it's connected to the exactly what I was talking about in my previous video. So, have a good one. Peace.